Billie Wayne Coble spent 29 years on death row, his final days marked by defiance and regret. But the path to his execution began decades earlier with a shocking rampage. After handcuffing his estranged wife's daughters and a young cousin in their home, he drove out and coldly gunned down her brother, a local police sergeant, and her parents in a fit of vengeful rage. To grasp how a man could reach such a breaking point, we must rewind to the hardships that scarred his earliest years. Hit that like button and subscribe to be part of our growing community. Also, drop a comment telling us where you're watching from as we dive into this chilling story. Born on September 9th, 1948 in Texas, Billie Wayne Coble entered a world already stacked against him. His family life was unstable from the start. His mother struggled with severe mental health issues, leading to her institutionalization when he was just a child. With his father absent or unable to provide, young Billy spent 12 long years in a state orphanage, a place meant for protection, but often filled with isolation and hardship. Imagine a boy, barely school age, separated from any sense of home, learning early that life could be cruel and unforgiving. He had at least one sibling, a sister, who later reflected on how those years left deep emotional wounds. Details on his formal education are scarce, but growing up in such an environment likely meant limited opportunities, with survival taking priority over school books or stability. These early traumas didn't just fade, they festered. By his late teens, Billy enlisted in the U.S. Marine Corps and was shipped off to Vietnam, serving as a machine gunner in brutal combat zones. The horrors he witnessed there, ambushes, loss of comrades, constant fear, changed him forever, planting the seeds of post-traumatic stress disorder that would haunt him long after returning home. His sister described him as a different man upon discharge, more withdrawn and volatile, his anger simmering just below the surface. There were no reports of petty crimes or school fights in his youth, but the orphanage, isolation, and war experiences built a foundation of unresolved pain, making relationships fragile and trust hard to come by. Little did anyone know, these buried struggles would one day erupt in unimaginable ways, but that's a chapter for later. Back home from the jungles of Vietnam, Billie Wayne Coble tried to piece together a normal life, but the shadows of war lingered like smoke he couldn't shake. At nearly 40 years old, he took a job as a projectionist at a drive-in movie theater in Central Texas, a quiet gig under the stars, screening films for families and young couples. That's where fate, or maybe just bad luck, stepped in. In the summer of 1988, he met Zelda Vicha, a woman from the nearby town of Axtell, with 3 young daughters from a previous marriage. She was drawn to his rough charm at first, the stories of his Marine days that made him seem tough yet tender. They hit it off quick, like a reel spinning too fast, and by July 3rd, just weeks after sparks flew, they tied the knot in a simple ceremony. It was Billy's third go at marriage, and for a fleeting moment, it felt like the fresh start he'd been chasing. But beneath the popcorn-scented romance, cracks formed almost from the opening scene. Billy, still wrestling with the ghosts of combat, nightmares that jolted him awake, a temper that flared without warning, struggled to fit into family life. He and Karen settled into a modest home on a quiet road in Axtell, right across from her parents, Robert and Zelda, and just down the way from her brother Bobby, a steady Waco police sergeant who doted on his sister. Karen's girls, teens and preteens, eyed this new stepdad warily, sensing the storm clouds in his moods. Billy tried. He was good with his own teenage son, Gordon, from an earlier marriage, teaching him to fix cars and stand tall. But with Karen, control crept in like fog. He'd snap over small things, a late dinner, a glance at the phone, his voice turning sharp, his hands sometimes following suit. She later told the court it started subtle, arguments that left her walking on eggshells, his jealousy flaring if she laughed too long with a friend. Raised in a close-knit family, Karen had never known this kind of edge, and it wore her down fast. By early July 1989, after less than a year, she sat him down and said the words that lit the fuse. "I don't love you anymore. I want a divorce. You need to move out." That rejection hit Billy like a grenade. To him, it wasn't just the end of a marriage, it was proof that the world always took what little he had. Desperate to hold on, he turned to darker tricks. One night in mid-July, while Karen was out at a bar with a girlfriend, Billy hid in the trunk of her car like a predator in wait. As she pulled onto the road, he burst through the back seat, knife in hand, pressing the blade to her ribs. "Drive," he growled, forcing her to a remote field under the Texas moon. There, in the dirt and silence, he taped her wrists and confessed his rage. "If I can't have you, no one can." For 2 agonizing hours, Karen talked him down, her voice steady despite the terror, promising to rethink the divorce just to see another dawn. He let her go, but the damage was done. She ran straight to her brother Bobby, who urged her to press charges. Days later, Billy was arrested for kidnapping and false imprisonment, indicted by a grand jury on August 24th. Released on bail, he stewed in silence, but the family circle tightened. Bobby even gifted Karen a fierce German shepherd for protection, a furry sentinel against the man she'd once called husband. Everything shattered on August 29th, 1989, when Billy's bottled fury exploded in a way no one saw coming. 9 days after his indictment, he drove back to that fateful road in Axtell, gun-loaded and heart-hardened. What happened next would scar the Vicha family forever and seal Billy's path to the needle. But that's the nightmare will unravel soon enough. He'd been spotted cruising the rural roads near Karen's home in the weeks before, his pickup truck a silent omen, but no one could predict the storm about to break. That day, fueled by a toxic mix of jealousy, despair, and a loaded .38 caliber revolver, he set out on a path of vengeance that would destroy an entire family and leave scars that time could never fully heal. It started around 3 p.m. at Karen's modest house on a dusty road, where the school bus dropped off her 3 daughters, aged 11, 14, and 16, and their 15-year-old male cousin, who was visiting. Billy, lying in wait like a shadow, burst in as they entered, his face twisted with fury. He didn't waste words. One by one, he overpowered the terrified kids, handcuffing their wrists behind their backs and binding their ankles with ropes and duct tape, leaving them helpless on the living room floor. The girls sobbed, begging him to stop, their voices echoing the innocence he'd just shattered. To ensure no cries for help escaped, Billy snipped the phone lines with cold precision, severing their lifeline to the outside world. Imagine the sheer terror. A stepdad turned monster, the home that should be safe now, a prison of fear. But this was just the setup. His real targets were the people he blamed for pulling Karen away. Leaving the bound children trembling in the house, Billy slipped out and drove the short distance to the home of Karen's brother, Bobby Vicha, a 39-year-old Waco police sergeant known for his steady hand and protective nature over his sister. Bobby was alone, perhaps unwinding after a shift, when Billy confronted him. A desperate struggle erupted, fists flying, bodies slamming, as Bobby fought for his life. But Billy had the gun. He fired a single shot into Bobby's neck, the bullet tearing through, leaving the officer gasping his last breaths on his own floor. Blood pooled in the quiet rooms of what had been a sanctuary, the tragic irony of a lawman slain in his home by family hitting like a gut punch. Bobby's death wasn't just a murder. It ripped away the guardian of the Vicha clan, leaving his loved ones exposed and heartbroken, his badge now a symbol of shattered trust. Billy didn't linger. He returned briefly to Karen's house, checking on the kids, perhaps to taunt them or ensure their silence, before crossing the street to the heart of the Vicha family, the home of Karen's parents, 64-year-old Robert Vicha and 60-year-old Zelda Vicha. These were salt-of-the-earth folks, retired and devoted grandparents who had welcomed Billy once, but now stood as barriers in his warped mind. Bursting in, he caught them off guard in their living room. First, he gunned down Robert, a shot to the chest that dropped the man who had built a life of quiet strength. Zelda, witnessing the horror, had no chance to flee. Billy turned the revolver on her, firing into her body as she crumpled beside her husband. Again, he cut the phone lines, methodically erasing any hope of rescue. The scene was devastating, blood staining the carpets where family gatherings once happened, the air thick with the metallic scent of loss. For the Vichas, this wasn't random violence. It was a betrayal that stole the pillars of their world, leaving grandchildren without the warmth of grandparents and a community reeling from the senseless erasure of good lives. As the sun dipped lower, Karen pulled into her driveway around 5 p.m., exhausted from her shift as a nurse's aide, unaware of the nightmare waiting inside. Billie ambushed her at the door, confessing in a chilling monotone, "I killed your mom and dad, and Bobby. But Bobby shot me first. Look." He showed a self-inflicted graze on his arm, a twisted bid for sympathy amid the chaos. Karen's world collapsed in that instant. The agony of losing her entire support system in one afternoon's rage, her screams mixing with her daughter's muffled cries from the floor. Billy handcuffed her, too, forcing her into his truck for a harrowing drive to a deserted field miles away. There, under the fading light, he assaulted her physically and emotionally, ranting about his pain while ignoring hers, the ultimate violation in a day of tragedies. The sun was still hanging low in the Texas sky on August 29, 1989, when the horrors in Axtell began to unravel, not through a routine police patrol, but thanks to the quick thinking of a terrified teenager. One of Karen Vicha's daughters, bound and gagged in the living room with her siblings and cousin, managed to wriggle her hands free just enough to loosen her restraints after Billie Wayne Coble left the house. Heart pounding, she hopped to a neighbor's door and screamed for help, alerting authorities to the nightmare unfolding. Deputies rushed to the scenes, discovering the lifeless bodies of Robert Vicha, 64, covered meticulously with blankets on his back porch like a military field dressing. A chilling nod to Coble's Vietnam past, his wife Zelda, 60, slumped in the garage, and their son Bobby Vicha, 39, shot during a desperate struggle. The phone lines at both homes had been severed, a calculated move that screamed premeditation, and the bound children spilled their story. Their stepdad had done this, vanishing with their mom at gunpoint. What started as a welfare check exploded into a triple homicide investigation, with McLennan County Sheriff's deputies and Waco police piecing together a timeline of rage that had simmered since Coble's earlier kidnapping arrest. Key forensic evidence tied it all together like a noose tightening around Coble's neck. Ballistics experts matched the .357 revolver found in his crashed vehicle to the bullet casings in his pocket and fragments pulled from Bobby Vicha's car, proving it was the weapon that ended the sergeant's life in that frantic garage fight. A .38 caliber revolver, also recovered from Coble, linked him to the shots that felled Robert and Zelda in their home. No fingerprints or DNA were highlighted in the records. This was 1989, before DNA tech was routine. But personal items like Robert Vicha's watch and wallet, snatched from the scene and found on Coble during his arrest, screamed theft amid murder. Medical examiners' autopsies confirmed the causes: single gunshots to vital areas, close range and cold. Eyewitness accounts from the kids and Karen sealed the link, describing Coble's every move, from handcuffing them to his chilling confession to Karen, "I killed your mom and dad and Bobby." His own words, recorded by Deputy Robert Brennan in the hospital, spontaneous boasts to nurses and cops that he'd killed 3 people, became damning audio evidence played for the jury. Coble's military records and history of violence, including abusive ex-wives, painted a pattern, but it was the physical haul from his capture that made escape impossible. As for how he was caught, it unfolded like a bad action movie, with twists that could have gone either way. After assaulting Karen in a remote Bosque County field, Coble drove back toward Axtell, but a sheriff's patrol car spotted his erratic truck and gave chase. Sirens blaring, speeds topping out, Coble refused to pull over, until he deliberately rammed into a parked car to shake them, crumpling his vehicle in a heap of metal. Officers swarmed, cutting through the door to free a battered Karen, while Coble, injured but defiant, was hauled out with the guns, casings, and stolen items still on him. At the hospital for treatment, his unprompted confessions flowed, turning suspicion into slam-dunk certainty. But even with him in cuffs, the Vicha family's fight for justice was just beginning. Would the courts deliver or drag it out for decades? With the noose of evidence tightening, Billie Wayne Coble's initial story crumbled almost as fast as he was caught. Right after his arrest, he tried to spin a tale of self-defense for at least one killing, showing deputies a graze wound on his arm and claiming, "Bobby shot me first" during their struggle, implying the police sergeant had drawn on him. But that claim fell apart under scrutiny. Medical exams revealed the wound was self-inflicted, likely from his own gun in a bid to stage the scene, and ballistics matched all shots to Coble's revolvers, with no weapon found on Bobby Vicha or any sign he'd fired back. No alibi emerged for the other murders either. He'd been spotted lurking nearby, and his immediate confessions to nurses and officers, bragging, "I just killed 3 people," left no room for denial. It was a desperate grasp at innocence that forensics, in his own words, shredded, setting the stage for a trial where the truth would bury him deeper. The 1990 guilt phase in McLennan County District Court unfolded like a grim replay of the crime itself, with prosecutors laying out a mountain of damning proof. The kids' terrified testimonies of being bound and abandoned, Karen Vicha's account of the kidnapping and assault, matching ballistics from Coble's guns, stolen items from the victims found in his truck, and those hospital bed admissions captured on tape. Coble's lawyers had filed notice of an insanity defense early on, hinting at his Vietnam PTSD and troubled past as reasons he snapped. But in a shocking pivot after the state rested, they dropped it for the guilt phase, instead conceding his actions while showing silent Vietnam War footage to the jury, perhaps planting seeds for sympathy later. Coble fumed, insisting he wanted a full fight for innocence, but the strategy shifted focus to mitigation. Key moments included ex-wives recounting his history of abuse, psychiatrists debating his mental state, one from his teen years labeling him sociopathic and hostile toward women, and the jury hearing how his orphanage upbringing and combat horrors might explain, but not excuse, the rage. After days of raw testimony, the jury delivered a guilty verdict on capital murder charges in April 1990. But the real drama hit during sentencing. They answered yes to special issues on whether the murders were deliberate and if Coble posed a future danger, sealing his fate. On June 14, 1990, the judge sentenced him to death, yet whispers of flawed jury instructions on mitigating evidence lingered, hinting this wasn't the end. Fast forward to 2007, when the Fifth U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals tossed the death sentence, ruling the old special issues didn't let jurors fully weigh Coble's PTSD and childhood trauma. That led to a 2008 punishment retrial in the same county where the battle raged over one question. Was this 59-year-old still a threat? Defense lawyers painted a reformed man, highlighting his 18 spotless years on death row. No fights, no violations, where he'd organized sports leagues, helped inmates with letters, and adapted peacefully, his age and heart issues making violence unlikely. Expert Dr. Mark Cunningham backed it with stats, pegging Coble's future risk as rock-bottom low, while slamming the state's psychiatrist as unscientific. Inmates and family testified to his calm demeanor, tying it back to untreated war scars. But prosecutors countered hard, dredging up his violent past. Beatings of ex-wives, molestation claims, and that evil grin Karen Vicha said he flashed her in court. Their stars. Dr. Richard Coons predicting endless danger based on Coble's lack of conscience, later deemed unreliable by courts, and prison expert A.P. Marilat warning of hidden violence in lockup, parts of his testimony called fabricated. A 1964 psych eval from Coble's youth labeled him paranoid and hostile, fueling the fire. After tense deliberations, the jury sided with the state, answering yes to future dangerousness and finding no mitigating factors strong enough for life. On September 4, 2008, they sentenced him to death. Behind the cold bars of Texas's death row, Billie Wayne Coble spent nearly 3 decades, 29 years to be exact, wrestling with the consequences of his 1989 rampage, a stretch that turned a once volatile man into something quieter, more contained. Housed at the Polunsky Unit in Livingston, a fortress-like prison known for its harsh isolation, where inmates spend 23 hours a day in single cells with limited human contact, Coble adapted to the monotonous grind of steel doors, fluorescent lights, and endless routine. No windows to the outside world, just concrete and the echo of distant shouts. It's a place designed to break spirits, where boredom and regret can weigh heavier than chains. Yet court records from his 2008 resentencing painted him as a model prisoner. No fights, no disciplinary write-ups in all those years, a stark contrast to the rage-fueled man of his past. He organized informal sports leagues among inmates when recreation time allowed, helped illiterate ones read mail from loved ones or draft letters home, and even assisted with small favors like sharing commissary items. Guards described him as cooperative, never a troublemaker, while fellow death row residents testified to his steady demeanor, perhaps softened by age and the slow drip of time. Did the horrors of Vietnam and his orphanage childhood finally catch up in reflection? Coble claimed in appeals he was a changed man, haunted by untreated PTSD that fueled his crimes. But remorse came in fits, sparse in early years, more evident later as he spoke of wishing he could undo the pain. Religion played a subtle role. Though not a fervent convert, he met with chaplains and found some solace in faith discussions, per prison logs, using it to cope rather than preach. His appeals dragged on relentlessly. The original 1990 death sentence overturned in 2007 due to flawed jury instructions on mitigation, leading to that 2008 retrial where experts debated his future risk. Further challenges to junk science testimony from state witnesses went up the ladder to the U.S. Supreme Court, all denied by early 2019, leaving him exhausted but resigned. In that grim environment where hope flickers like a faulty bulb, Coble's days blurred into reading books on history and self-help, writing to family, and pondering the family he shattered. A reflective limbo that humanized him without erasing the blood on his hands. But as execution dates loomed and slipped away, the weight pressed harder. Was this long wait justice, or just another form of torment? The morning of February 28, 2019, dawned like any other in Polunsky unit for the 70-year-old Coble. But the air hummed with finality, his appeals exhausted, clemency denied by the Texas Board of Pardons and Paroles just days before. He rose early in his cell, likely around 6 a.m., for the standard routine. A basic breakfast of whatever the unit served that day, perhaps oatmeal or toast, as Texas had abolished special last meal requests in 2011 after an inmate's extravagant order went uneaten. For his final meal later that afternoon, Coble received the same as other inmates. No custom choices, just institutional fare like a sandwich, fruit, and chips, eaten alone in quiet contemplation. Visitors came in waves, family members, including his son Gordon and grandson Dalton, who spent hours in the visitation area separated by glass, sharing memories, tears, and goodbyes. A spiritual advisor joined for prayer and counsel, offering words of peace amid the tension. Coble, described as calm but emotional, hugged who he could through the barriers, telling loved ones he cherished them. As the clock ticked toward evening, he was moved to the Death Watch cell near the chamber in Huntsville's Walls unit, about an hour's drive away, where he waited under constant guard supervision. At around 6 p.m., strapped to he gurney in the sterile execution chamber with IV lines inserted, he faced witnesses from both sides. Vicha family members on one viewing side, his own on the other. Asked for last words, he delivered a cryptic mix. "Yes, sir, that will be $5. I love you, and I love you. Mike, I love you. Where's Nellie at? I love you. That will be $5. Take care." The $5 line puzzled many, possibly a private joke or nod to his past. A single dose of pentobarbital flowed at 6:13 p.m., the lethal injection method Texas used, sending him into unconsciousness. He gasped a few times, then stilled, pronounced dead at 6:24 p.m., 11 minutes later. Chaos erupted moments after. His son and grandson, overcome with grief, banged on the viewing window, cursing and shouting, leading to their brief arrest for disorderly conduct before release on bail. For the Vicha survivors, it closed a painful chapter. For Coble's kin, it shattered what remained. The room fell silent, a solemn end to a life marked by violence and loss. In the end, Billie Wayne Coble's story leaves us pondering the depths of human brokenness and redemption. Does a system that lets someone linger on death row for 30 years truly serve justice? Or does it just prolong suffering for everyone involved? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And if this gripped you, hit that like button and subscribe for more true stories that make you think.